A 16th century map shows Antarctica 300 years before its discovery. This is the profound mystery of ancient cartography, where ink and parchment hold secrets that rewrite history. By the end of our journey, you will possess a new understanding of humanity's forgotten voyages and the lost chapters of our world. We will examine 15 ancient maps that depict lands long before their official discovery, from a Korean chart revealing Africa's shape to a Venetian document haunted by a phantom island. How could cultures separated by vast oceans and centuries share such precise geographical knowledge? This exploration is not about old drawings, but about recovering a hidden narrative of global connection and pre-modern insight that challenges everything we assume about the age of exploration. What does it mean when the past seems to know more than we do? In the year 1513, an Ottoman admiral named Piri Reis put the finishing touches on a world map that would become a cornerstone of modern mystery. This was not merely a navigational tool of its time, it was a collage of history pieced together from over 20 source charts, including some reportedly drawn by Christopher Columbus himself. The surviving fragment, now housed in Istanbul, reveals a breathtakingly accurate profile of South America's eastern coast and the western bulge of Africa, a feat of cartography that alone would be remarkable. Yet it is the landmass sketched below these continents that ignites a firestorm of debate. Stretching southward from what seems to be the tip of South America is a coastline that many argue should not exist on any map for another 300 years. When this southern contour is compared to modern seismic surveys of the Antarctic landmass beneath miles of ice, the resemblance is startling. It appears to chart the Queen Maud Land coastline, a shape hidden from human eyes by glacial sheets for millennia. The immediate question is as profound as it is simple. How could a 16th century admiral with the technology of his day map a continent that was not officially discovered until 1820? The most compelling theory does not credit Piri Reis with divine knowledge, but rather with being a brilliant archivist. He himself wrote that he consulted ancient source maps, some dating back to the time of Alexander the Great. Scholars like Professor Charles Hapgood champion the idea that these source maps preserved geographical knowledge from a much earlier, advanced seafaring culture, a civilization capable of global exploration in a forgotten age. This knowledge, perhaps salvaged from the legendary library of Alexandria or passed down through generations of sailors, was then compiled by Piri Reis into his singular work. Mainstream historians offer a counterpoint, suggesting the southern land is a speculative, distorted version of South America's own coast, or a representation of the mythical great southern continent cartographers had long believed must exist to balance the northern landmasses. The debate is a perfect microcosm of our entire exploration, a clash between established historical narrative and an artifact that whispers of a different story. Whether it shows Antarctica or not, the Piri Reis map forces us to confront a tantalizing possibility that our planet's geography was once known with a precision we only reacquired centuries later. The mystery of the Piri Reis map is one of inherited knowledge, a whisper from a possibly ancient source. But what happens when a map seems to be a direct, contemporary record of a discovery, yet its very parchment becomes the subject of the investigation? This is the labyrinthine puzzle of the Vinland map, dated to around 1440. This medieval document presents a stunning vision of the North Atlantic. Beyond the familiar outlines of Europe and Greenland, it shows a distinct, jagged island in the Western Ocean, labeled clearly as Vinlanda Insula. If genuine, this single piece of vellum would be the earliest known cartographic evidence of North America, drawn over half a century before Columbus sailed and directly validating the Norse sagas of Leif Erikson's voyages around the year 1000. It would transform our understanding of medieval geography from a closed, old-world system into one that acknowledged lands across the sea. The map's modern story began in 1965, when it was presented to the world with great fanfare. Initially, it was hailed as a revolutionary find, a missing piece of the historical puzzle. But almost immediately, doubts surfaced. The authenticity of an ancient document is not judged by its drawings alone, but by the very chemistry of its creation. The ink became the primary suspect. Early examinations raised red flags, with some analysts detecting anatase, a specific form of titanium dioxide, in the yellowish ink lines. The argument was that this particular pigment was not commercially available until the 1920s, suggesting a modern forgery. The case seemed closed for many, a clever 20th-century hoax designed to rewrite history for profit or fame. Yet, like any good mystery, new evidence emerged to complicate the narrative. Later, more sophisticated tests conducted by institutions like Yale University and the University of California, Davis, told a different story. Their analyses suggested the anatase could be a natural byproduct of medieval ink production, perhaps from a particular iron gall recipe, and that the parchment and wormholes were consistent with a 15th-century book. The scientific community remains divided, a testament to how difficult it can be to definitively prove or disprove the past with modern tools. Beyond the chemistry, historians of cartography note the map style is a curious blend, incorporating known 15th-century sources for its Old World sections, with the depiction of Vinland appearing almost as an afterthought, tacked onto the edge of the known world. This ongoing forensic battle makes the Vinland map a masterclass in historical authentication. It forces us to ask what constitutes proof when dealing with a single, unique artifact. Is the burden on the map to prove its own antiquity beyond all doubt, or does the compelling correlation with the well-documented Norse sagas lend it credibility? The map sits in a frustrating limbo, too controversial to be accepted as definitive evidence, yet too intriguing to be dismissed entirely. It embodies the tension at the heart of all these mysteries, a tangible object that promises to bridge a gap in our knowledge, if only we could agree on the language it speaks. Whether it is a genuine medieval chart or an exquisite forgery, its power lies in the questions it forces upon us, challenging the neat timeline of discovery and reminding us that history is often written not in stone, but in fragile ink that time itself can obscure. The debate over authenticity, as with the Vinland map, forces us to scrutinize the very parchment of history, but some maps present a different kind of puzzle, one where the cartographic error itself becomes a powerful, persistent ghost. South of Iceland, on a map published in 1558, lies a substantial island named Frisland. It is rendered with careful detail, complete with harbors, mountains, and place names, suggesting a well-documented and frequently visited land. The map was attributed to the Venetian Zeno brothers, who claimed it was based on the voyages of their ancestors in the late 1300s, voyages that allegedly reached the New World. For over a century, this Frisland was copied faithfully by the greatest cartographers of Europe, from Mercator to Ortelius, becoming an unquestioned part of the North Atlantic. There was only one profound problem: Frisland does not exist. So where did this phantom archipelago come from, and why did it cling so stubbornly to the world's charts? The most likely explanation is a cascade of misunderstandings, fused with the fog-bound realities of northern exploration. The Zeno narrative, possibly blending fact with family legend, might have conflated the Faroe Islands with a sandbank sighting or a severe storm that mislocated a ship's crew. Some historians suggest the story incorporates fragments of knowledge from Norse fishermen, whose oral accounts of real islands like Iceland or Greenland could have been distorted through translation and time before reaching Venetian ears. Others have proposed a more dramatic source, that Frisland represents a folk memory of a now submerged landmass, a piece of the continental shelf that was above water thousands of years ago and lingered in seafaring tales. Regardless of its origin, the legacy of Frisland is a masterclass in how myths become embedded in official knowledge. Once a landmass appeared on a respected map, it gained the weight of authority. Subsequent mapmakers, lacking contradictory data from the treacherous North Atlantic, would copy it, refine its coastlines, and in doing so, grant it further legitimacy. It became a cartographic fact by consensus, a place sailors might even claim to have seen in the haze, its existence confirmed by the very maps they carried. This persistence reveals a crucial truth about historical maps. They are not just records of geography, but also records of belief, ambition, and error. Frisland was a place people believed should be there, and so on parchment it was. Its eventual erasure from the maps in the 1700s, as systematic exploration finally charted those empty waters, is a quiet testament to the slow, painstaking process of replacing legend with observation. The story of this phantom island serves as a perfect bridge, a cautionary tale about the seductive power of maps to create worlds as well as depict them. It prepares us to examine maps that, unlike the ghost of Frisland, seem to depict realities that are startlingly concrete, yet impossibly out of time. While phantoms like Frisland were born from error and belief, other maps were created through acts of deliberate theft, their value measured in kingdoms and trade winds. The Cantino Planisphere of 1502 exists because of espionage. This stunning Portuguese world map, rich with color and gold leaf, is named not for its creator, but for its thief, Alberto Cantino. He was an Italian agent working for the Duke of Ferrara, and his mission was singular: infiltrate Lisbon, then the buzzing nerve center of global exploration, and procure the crown's most guarded secret, its latest master chart of the world. Cantino succeeded, smuggling the map out in sections hidden within a barrel. His daring act preserved a document that reveals far more than just Portuguese prowess. It hints at a geographical understanding that seems to move with impossible speed. The map's most startling feature for historians is its depiction of Brazil. Pedro Álvares Cabral had only stumbled upon this eastern bulge of South America in 1500, claiming it for Portugal. Yet here, a mere 2 years later, is a meticulously charted coastline, showing the characteristic curve from the Amazon Delta down to what is now São Paulo. The detail is not a rough sketch. It includes bays, capes, and river mouths rendered with an accuracy that would take other European powers decades to achieve. How was this possible? The map itself provides clues to its own sophistication. It is one of the earliest to employ a detailed latitude scale along its left side, a tool borrowed from astronomical navigation that allowed for more precise plotting of a coastline's north-south position. Its ornate wind roses, those compass-like stars, chart the prevailing winds and currents of the Atlantic, knowledge painstakingly gathered by Portuguese caravels over preceding decades. This technical mastery suggests the chart was not drawn from a single voyage's hasty notes, but synthesized from multiple, perhaps even secret, expeditions. Some researchers propose that Portuguese captains riding the South Atlantic gyre may have encountered the Brazilian coast well before Cabral's official discovery, keeping the knowledge confidential to protect a potential claim. The Cantino Planisphere, therefore, is not just a map, it is a snapshot of state intelligence at its most valuable. In an age where a single accurate chart could lead a fleet to the Spice Islands or a mountain of gold, cartography was the ultimate strategic asset. This artifact forces us to reconsider the official timeline of discovery as merely the public announcement, the tip of an iceberg built on hidden voyages, pilfered logs, and whispered conversations between sailors. It makes us wonder what other coastlines were mapped in confidential atlases that never survived the intrigues of the court or the damp of a ship's hold, their secrets dissolving into time just as completely as any phantom island. Sometimes a map's power lies not in what it reveals, but in the single word it chooses to write upon the blank spaces. In the small town of Saint-Dié-des-Vosges in 1507, a German cartographer named Martin Waldseemüller and a circle of scholarly friends were engaged in an act of profound creation. They were compiling a new cosmography, a book meant to synthesize all known geography, and for it, Waldseemüller drafted a world map of breathtaking ambition. It was a masterpiece of the German Renaissance, printed from 12 separate woodblocks and spanning over 8 feet wide when assembled. Technically, it did not depict an unknown land, but it performed a far more lasting magic. It gave that land a name. In the southern continent, across the vast ocean west of Europe, Waldseemüller inscribed a word that would echo through centuries: America. This was the first time the name appeared on any map, a cartographic baptism in honor of the Florentine explorer and merchant Amerigo Vespucci, whose published accounts of voyages to a new continental landmass had deeply impressed the Saint-Dié group. With that single act of labeling, Waldseemüller's pen did more than record geography. It began to invent a new geographical identity for the world. The map itself is a stunning hybrid of old knowledge and startling new insight. It still relies on the classical framework of Ptolemy for Africa and Asia, but it integrates the latest Portuguese and Spanish sailing data. Most revolutionary is its central cartographic argument. It clearly shows South America as a continent entirely separate from Asia, with an ocean between them. This was a conceptual leap that contradicted Columbus' own belief until his dying day that he had reached the outskirts of Asia. Waldseemüller and his colleagues, piecing together Vespucci's reports, dared to propose a fundamentally new model of the world, one containing a fourth part of the globe. The map's form is as meaningful as its content. It is drawn on a cordiform or heart-shaped projection, a design that symbolizes not just technical skill but a certain reverence for the subject, framing the world as an object of both scientific study and almost artistic devotion. This context is vital. The map was not state-sponsored espionage like the Cantino Planisphere, but a product of scholarly curiosity, an attempt by humanists in a remote monastery to rationally organize a world that was suddenly, bewilderingly, much larger than anyone had dreamed. Yet, in a fascinating twist of history, Waldseemüller himself seems to have later doubted his own boldness. In later maps, he retreated from the name America, perhaps as he learned more about Columbus' prior voyages. But the genie was out of the bottle. The name, so elegantly placed on that beautiful, authoritative document, was copied and spread by other cartographers. It stuck. This is the ultimate demonstration of a map's power to shape reality, not just reflect it. Waldseemüller's map created a permanent category in the human mind, a new world called America. It reminds us that every map is a story told by its maker, a blend of data, interpretation, and sometimes a brilliant, lasting mistake. That act of naming forces us to ask, whose journeys do we memorialize, and whose stories get written onto the parchment of history, becoming the truth that future generations simply accept as the way the world has always been. The power of a name, as Waldseemüller demonstrated, can shape reality for centuries. But what about a map born not from stolen charts or naming rights, but purely from the power of a reasoned guess? In 1737, the French geographer Philippe Buache published a world map that stands as a monument to Enlightenment thinking. Unlike the Piri Reis map, shrouded in claims of ancient sources, Buache's work was openly theoretical, a product of logic and symmetry applied to the planet's great blank spaces. He was a man of science, not legend, and he believed the Earth's landmasses must be balanced. Since there was so much land in the northern hemisphere, he deduced a substantial southern continent must exist to maintain equilibrium. On his map, he depicted this hypothesized land not as a single mass, but as two large islands separated by a frozen sea that stretched from the South Pole. For over a century, this was viewed as an interesting but ultimately incorrect exercise in speculative geography. Then, in the 20th century, technology allowed us to see beneath the ice. Modern seismic and radar surveys revealed the true subglacial topography of Antarctica, and the result was chillingly familiar. The continent is, in fact, not a single landmass, but a vast archipelago of major land divisions, like West and East Antarctica, separated by a deep, ice-filled basin. The resemblance to Buache's twin landmasses and his central sea is far too close to dismiss as mere coincidence. So how did an 18th-century theorist, without satellites or ice-penetrating radar, seemingly sketch the ghostly skeleton of a frozen continent? One compelling possibility is that Buache was not just guessing in a vacuum. He was a meticulous scholar and the official geographer to the French king, with access to the latest, and sometimes secret, reports from global expeditions. While Antarctica itself was undiscovered, fragments of data were filtering back from southern voyages, reports of impenetrable ice fields, strange currents, and perhaps even sightings of distant, icy mountains. Buache, a master synthesizer, could have woven these scattered clues into his theoretical framework, creating a map that was part deduction, part subconscious collage of sailors' logs. His work embodies the Enlightenment-era practice of scientific conjecture, where cartographers used reason to fill voids on the map, creating plausible geography that often guided real explorers. This case forces us to blur the line between lucky guess and informed deduction. It suggests that the human mind, when armed with fragments of truth and a rigorous method, can sometimes model reality with uncanny accuracy, even when that reality is hidden under miles of ancient ice. The Buache map challenges a simple narrative of discovery, proposing instead that knowledge can emerge from the drawing board as surely as from the deck of a ship, and that a map of what should be there can, through a strange alchemy of logic and fragmentary evidence, accidentally reveal what is. Theoretical maps like Buache's show how logic can sketch a hidden world, but sometimes the most influential maps are those that marry science with sheer artistry. In 1531, French mathematician Oronce Finé produced a world map of breathtaking beauty, a single sheet engraved with meticulous care. Its shape is immediately striking, a delicate cordiform or heart that frames the known lands within a symbol of reverence and wonder. But the true cartographic statement lies at its bottom edge, where Finé depicts a vast, continuous landmass wrapping around the southern pole. He labels it boldly Terra Australis, the southern land. This was not a new idea, but on Finé's map, it received its most persuasive and elegant form yet, a continent of such plausible detail it would haunt explorers' dreams for the next 250 years. The belief in a great southern continent was ancient, tracing its roots to the Greek geographer Ptolemy in the 2nd century. His reasoning was fundamentally aesthetic and philosophical, a belief in cosmic symmetry. The known world of Europe, Asia, and North Africa occupied the northern hemisphere, so logic dictated an equal weight of land must exist in the south to balance the globe, preventing it from tipping over. This idea, known as the theory of continental balance, was less a geographical fact and more a scientific axiom, an unquestioned rule about how a harmonious universe should be arranged. For medieval and Renaissance scholars, it made perfect sense. Finé, a brilliant mathematician, was operating firmly within this tradition. His map was not based on eyewitness reports from southern voyages, but on the compelling elegance of a mathematical and philosophical principle. He connected this speculative Terra Australis directly to the southern tip of South America, creating a continuous coastline that made the theoretical land seem like a logical, navigable extension of the New World. The power of this beautiful era cannot be overstated. By giving the mythical continent such a definitive and attractive form, Finé's map and others like it cemented the idea in the European imagination. It became a cartographic fact by philosophical decree, appearing on globes and charts for generations. This persistent phantom did more than decorate maps, it directly fueled the age of exploration. The quest for the riches of Terra Australis became a primary objective for nations and adventurers. It was this very belief that led the British Admiralty to instruct Captain James Cook on his first epic voyage in 1768, giving him secret orders to search for the great southern continent after his astronomical mission in Tahiti. Cook's meticulous voyages, which famously circumnavigated Antarctica without ever sighting the mainland, finally began to shrink the mythical continent on the map, replacing its lush, imagined forests with the brutal reality of an icy, isolated land. In a profound twist, the search for a beautiful philosophical ideal, perpetuated by maps like Finé's, ultimately led to the discovery of a far harsher but very real Antarctica. This journey from philosophical axiom to explored reality reveals a deep truth about how we have historically understood our world. Maps have never been just passive records. They are active arguments, visions of what the world should be according to the prevailing wisdom of the time. Finé's heart-shaped map is a perfect artifact of this process, a work where the drive for balance and beauty literally shaped the contours of the unknown. It reminds us that our charts are often as much a reflection of our hopes and our theories as they are of our observations, and that sometimes the most compelling errors are the ones that drive us to sail off the edge of the known page in search of what we believe must be there. The search for a southern continent was a European obsession, but the world was being mapped from other centers of knowledge with equally profound insight. In the kingdom of Joseon, Korea, in the year 1402, court scholars completed a work of staggering ambition, the Kangnido, or the map of integrated lands and regions of historical countries and capitals. This is not a European chart, and its perspective immediately reorients our entire story. Here, China is not a peripheral curiosity on the edge of the page. It is the vast central heart of the world, rendered in meticulous detail. The map unfolds to show a comprehensive Afro-Eurasia, from Korea and Japan in the east all the way to a distant and startlingly recognizable western edge, the continent of Africa. This depiction, created nearly a century before Vasco da Gama would sail around the Cape of Good Hope, is what stops historians in their tracks. The Kangnido's Africa is not a vague, triangular stump. It shows a continental mass that narrows toward the south, with a distinct western bulge and an eastern coastline that curves, suggesting an awareness that the land did not continue indefinitely. It hints at the possibility that the southern tip of Africa was known, or at least logically surmised, far earlier in the east than in the west. So how did this knowledge traverse the immense distance from Africa to Korea decades before European caravels made the journey? The answer is written in the very lines of the map, a testament to a pre-modern information superhighway, the Silk Road. The Kangnido was not drawn from first-hand Korean exploration of Africa, but was a brilliant synthesis. Korean cartographers working under royal command integrated earlier Chinese world maps, which themselves had been updated over centuries with data from Arab and Persian geographers. This was the true global network of its age. Muslim scholars, building on the work of figures like the great traveler Ibn Battuta, who had journeyed across much of Africa and Asia in the 14th century, produced remarkably accurate geographical texts and charts. Their knowledge, carried by merchants and diplomats along the sprawling trade routes that connected the Indian Ocean world to Central Asia and China, eventually filtered eastward. A Korean diplomat or scholar in the Ming capital might have accessed these Islamic world maps, translating their contours into the artistic and scholarly conventions of East Asian cartography. The Kangnido map, therefore, is not a record of a single discovery, but a snapshot of cumulative, cross-cultural intelligence. It shatters the simplistic notion that geographical understanding was a European monopoly. revealing instead a sophisticated and interconnected intellectual world where knowledge was a commodity as valuable as silk or spices. This single parchment forces us to widen our lens, to see that the story of discovery is not one of isolated breakthroughs, but of a slow, collective assembling of the world's jigsaw puzzle, with pieces passed from hand to hand across continents and civilizations. It poses a quiet, revolutionary question. What if the age of exploration was not about finding new lands, but about different parts of the world finally sharing what they had each known for centuries? The Kangnido map reveals a world connected by trade and shared knowledge, but another ancient framework would come to dominate the European mind, one built not on observation, but on the authority of a single, brilliant text. For over 1,000 years, the geographical vision of Claudius Ptolemy was the closest thing the Western world had to scientific truth. A Greco-Roman scholar working in 2nd century Alexandria, Ptolemy never set out to map the Americas, for they were utterly unknown to him. His masterpiece, the Geographia, was a mathematical model of the world as the Romans understood it, a vast landmass stretching from the Canary Islands in the west to a guest at China in the east, with Africa curling south to connect to another great southern continent, enclosing the Indian Ocean as a giant lake. This was a world without an Atlantic or Pacific Ocean as we know them. Yet, when his text was rediscovered and translated into Latin in the early 15th century, it caused a revolution. Here was a system, a way to map any place using a grid of longitude and latitude, a coordinate geometry for the entire planet. For Renaissance scholars, this was not an antique curiosity. It was the most advanced cartographic technology they had ever seen. Printers rushed to produce editions of Ptolemy's Geographia, each filled with beautiful, meticulously engraved maps based on his ancient data. These maps became the ultimate reference, the authoritative template onto which all new knowledge had to be forced, like trying to fit a new puzzle piece into the wrong puzzle. This created a profound and dangerous tension. Explorers like Christopher Columbus studied Ptolemy intensely, but they were studying a map that was fundamentally wrong in two critical ways. First, Ptolemy had drastically underestimated the size of the Earth, calculating a circumference about 1/6 smaller than it actually is. Second, his map showed Europe and Asia as stretching much farther east than they do, with the distance from Spain to Japan being a relatively short sail westward. Columbus, armed with this flawed but authoritative data, became convinced his voyage to Asia was not just possible but practical. He was, in a very real sense, navigating by a map that erased an entire ocean and a pair of continents. The legacy of this is visible in what are known as Ptolemaic palimpsests, maps where the original classical geography is still visible, but where later hands have nervously scribbled in new discoveries along the margins. You can see the clean, confident lines of the ancient world, and then, crammed into the western edge of the parchment, a rough, tentative sketch labeled Terra Incognita or the New World, an awkward afterthought on a 2,000-year-old diagram. These hybrid documents are physical manifestations of a cognitive struggle, the moment when empirical evidence from sailors began to crack the marble edifice of classical authority. The ghost of Ptolemy's map did not vanish quickly. It lingered for generations, shaping expeditions and justifying misconceptions. His work proves a paradoxical truth in the history of knowledge, that an incorrect map, if it is elegant, systematic, and backed by great names, can be more powerful than 100 truthful reports from common sailors. It guided men across an ocean they did not understand, toward a destination that did not exist on their charts, and in doing so, accidentally led them to a reality far stranger than any ancient text could have imagined. While Ptolemy's flawed world was being rediscovered in Europe, a different and far more accurate geographical project was already reaching its completion in a dazzlingly cosmopolitan kingdom. In the year 1154, in the sun-drenched city of Palermo on the island of Sicily, the Arab geographer and scholar Muhammad Al-Idrisi presented his life's work to his patron, King Roger II. The result was the Tabula Rogeriana, a monumental planisphere engraved on a massive silver disc and accompanied by a detailed geographical text called the Book of Roger. This was not just a map, it was an encyclopedia of the known world, a synthesis of knowledge that would remain the most authoritative geographical reference for centuries, and it viewed the planet from a perspective that might seem upside down to modern eyes. Al-Idrisi oriented his map with south at the top. This was a common convention in Islamic cartography, aligning the map so that the viewer looked toward Mecca, placing spiritual direction at the heart of the geographical project. The world it depicted stretched from the Atlantic coasts of Europe and Africa to the distant lands of Southeast Asia, rendered with a level of detail that was simply unmatched. The coastlines, while stylized, follow recognizable contours. More impressively, the map meticulously charts the great river systems of the Nile, the Danube, and the Tigris and Euphrates, along with mountain ranges like the Alps and the Pyrenees, with an accuracy that European maps would not achieve for hundreds of years. So how was such a precise and comprehensive view possible in the 12th century? The answer lies in the unique environment that produced it. The court of King Roger II was a brilliant anomaly, a Norman Christian king who ruled over a majority Arab Muslim population and fostered an intellectual culture where scholars of all faiths collaborated. Palermo was a living library of the Mediterranean world. Al-Idrisi, educated in the great learning centers of Islamic Spain and North Africa, was the perfect scholar for this task. For 15 years, he and a team of researchers systematically gathered and cross-referenced information. They interviewed Norman sailors returning from northern voyages, consulted Arab merchants whose trade networks stretched along the Silk Road to China, and pored over the accounts of travelers who had journeyed deep into Africa. They also integrated the classical Greek geographical knowledge preserved and expanded upon by Islamic scholars, creating a true fusion of ancient theory and contemporary empirical data. The Tabula Rogeriana, therefore, is a map drawn from 1,000 different voices. It is a snapshot of a connected medieval world where knowledge flowed along trade routes and was debated in multilingual courts. It shows us a world that was known and known well long before the so-called Age of Discovery. This masterpiece forces a profound reconsideration. We often frame the story of exploration as a European venture to fill in blank spaces on the map. But Al-Idrisi's work reveals that many of those spaces were not blank at all. They were already filled in on other maps in other libraries, seen through other cultural lenses. The great southern continent might have been a mystery, but the intricate details of Europe, Asia, and Africa were being recorded with scholarly precision in Palermo, while knights and castles dominated the European imagination. The map stands as a quiet, powerful testament to what human curiosity can achieve when it transcends cultural and political boundaries, weaving a single picture of the world from countless threads of shared experience. Silk whispers of a different global vision, one woven not from stolen secrets or philosophical guesses, but from imperial ambition. In the closing years of the 14th century, as Europe was slowly emerging from its medieval framework, Chinese cartographers of the newly established Ming Dynasty completed a work of staggering scale, the Da Ming Hunyi Tu, or the amalgamated map of the Great Ming Empire. Painted on a vast scroll of silk, it was less a navigational chart and more a statement of power, a visual declaration of the empire's place at the center of a comprehensively known world. Its scope is breathtaking, stretching from Korea and Japan in the east all the way to the Atlantic coastline of Africa in the west, a span of geographical awareness that European courts would not match for another century. Once again, the depiction of Africa is the map's silent shock, rendered with a southern coastline that suggests an understanding of the continent's true shape long before Dyers or da Gama rounded its tip. This was not a lucky guess. It was the fruit of a systematic, state-sponsored effort to understand the world. Chinese cartography was technologically sublime, employing a precise grid system of squares, each representing a fixed distance, which allowed for a remarkably consistent scale across the massive map. This mathematical rigor, combined with information gathered from generations of Silk Road travelers and the burgeoning maritime networks of the Indian Ocean, produced a document of administrative genius, likely used to manage tribute relations and plan military logistics. The map's creation sits on the precipice of a monumental historical moment, the legendary treasure voyages of Admiral Zheng He in the early 15th century. His colossal fleets, some carrying thousands of men on hundreds of ships, would sail throughout Southeast Asia, across the Indian Ocean to Arabia, and down the East African coast, precisely the region so carefully detailed on the map. The Ming Hunyi II, therefore, is not just a map of what was known, but a blueprint for what was possible, a chart for an emerging Chinese-led world system. And this is where the map's legacy turns from triumph to profound mystery. Shortly after Zheng He's final voyage, the Ming Dynasty turned inward. The treasure fleets were dismantled, the shipyards closed, and the records of these epic journeys were largely lost or destroyed by later officials who saw them as wasteful. China deliberately abandoned its course toward global maritime exploration. The Ming Hunyi II thus becomes a haunting artifact of a road not taken. It symbolizes a parallel timeline, one where a sophisticated, non-European power held the most advanced geographical knowledge and the naval capacity to act upon it. What if that inward turn had never happened? What if those fleets had continued westward, perhaps even encountering the coasts of the Americas from the Pacific? The map does not show the new world, but its existence forces us to ponder how different the age of discovery might have been had its voyages been launched from the Forbidden City rather than the ports of Lisbon and Seville. It is a testament to a fleeting moment of outward-looking curiosity, a glimpse of a connected world that was meticulously mapped, brilliantly understood, and then, by a choice of policy, deliberately left behind. That inward turn by the Ming Dynasty may have closed a door on global exploration, but the human desire to chart the world is far older than any dynasty or empire. In a quiet museum in Turin, Italy, rests a fragile piece of papyrus that resets the entire clock of cartographic history. Created around 1150 BC for a royal expedition into the eastern desert of Egypt, the Turin papyrus map is not a chart of distant continents, but something perhaps more revolutionary. It is the world's oldest known topographic map, a practical guide drawn with startling clarity over 3,000 years ago. Its purpose was direct, to lead a mining and quarrying crew to the valuable stone deposits of the Wadi Hammamat. Yet the map achieves this with a sophistication that feels almost modern. The papyrus uses a consistent orientation with south at the top and renders the desert landscape in precise, recognizable forms. Brown, saw-tooth lines depict the mountain ranges flanking the dry river valley. A winding, thick black line represents the wadi itself, the main route through the harsh terrain. Clearest of all are the practical landmarks, the quarries marked with blocks of stone, the gold mine indicated by a small shrine dedicated to the god Ammon, and even a small settlement, likely the workers' camp, drawn beside a well. Hieratic script, the cursive writing of the Egyptian scribes, labels key features and even notes the distances between them in units called itru. This is not a symbolic or artistic representation. It is a functional document, a blueprint for resource extraction in the service of the state. Its existence speaks volumes about the society that produced it. This map was born from the highly organized, bureaucratic engine of the New Kingdom of Egypt. A state capable of building the pyramids and administering a vast territory required precise records, inventories, and logistics. The scribe who drew this map was not an explorer charting the unknown, but a civil servant, applying standardized techniques to document a known landscape for economic gain. That very normality is what makes the map so extraordinary. It proves that the conceptual toolkit for accurate, scaled, information-rich cartography was not a Renaissance invention, but was fully operational in the late Bronze Age. It demonstrates that ancient people thought spatially and practically about their world, translating three-dimensional geography into two-dimensional plans with remarkable skill. This single, cracked papyrus forces a profound shift in perspective. If the Egyptian state could produce this detailed map of a desert valley for a mining mission, what other geographical knowledge did they and other contemporary civilizations record on now lost scrolls? Did they map the full course of the Nile or chart the coasts of the lands they traded with in the Levant and beyond? The Turin map is a surviving fragment, a lone whisper from a world where such documents were likely commonplace tools of administration, most of which have turned to dust in the damp soil of the Nile or the fires of time. It lays a foundational truth beneath all the other maps we have explored. The impulse to chart our surroundings, to make a portable picture of place, is one of humanity's oldest and most persistent intellectual endeavors. It suggests that every later map, from Ptolemy's globe to Waldseemüller's heart, stands on shoulders that reach back into a deep and largely silent past. Centuries before the Egyptian scribe rolled his papyrus, another hand pressed a stylus into wet clay, creating a vision of the world far more ancient. The Babylonian world map, dating to around 600 BCE, is a small, fragile tablet that holds not the shape of continents, but the shape of a civilization's mind. To view it expecting coastlines and rivers is to miss its point entirely. This artifact is not geography as we understand it. It is cosmology rendered in clay, a philosophical statement about humanity's place in the universe. At its heart sits a simple rectangle, unmistakably labeled Babylon. Radiating out from this central city are concentric circles representing the Bitter River, the Maratu, a circular ocean believed to encircle the entire habitable world. Beyond this cosmic moat, arranged like islands in the void, are 8 triangular wedges labeled Nagu, meaning regions. These are not accurate depictions of neighboring kingdoms, but stylized, almost heraldic symbols for distant lands like Assyria or Urartu, places existing at the very edge of Babylonian knowledge. The most tantalizing elements are the cryptic annotations in the map's outer regions, brief descriptions that speak of a great wall, a place where the sun is not seen, and a region beyond the flight of birds. Scholars interpret these as a blend of mythological geography and garbled travelers' tales, perhaps referencing the mountains of Armenia, the deserts of Arabia, or even the distant coasts of Greece or Egypt, filtered through layers of storytelling and cosmological belief. This map's primary function was not to guide a traveler from one city to another, but to orient the Babylonian within a sacred and ordered cosmos. It visualized key myths, like the Epic of Gilgamesh's journey to the edge of the world, and reinforced the ideological truth that Babylon was the literal and spiritual center of creation. The circular ocean was not just a body of water, it was a boundary between the ordered world of human civilization and the chaotic, supernatural realm that lay beyond. In this way, the tablet is perhaps the purest example of a map's original purpose, a tool to impose human meaning on the terrifying and magnificent unknown. It ordered reality by defining a center, drawing a boundary, and naming what lay outside, no matter how vaguely. This ancient perspective casts a long shadow over every other map we have discussed. It reminds us that the Piri Reis chart, the Kangnido, and even Waldseemüller's beautiful heart are not merely neutral scientific documents. They are, each in their own way, descendants of that Babylonian clay tablet, products of their culture's central beliefs, political ambitions, and deepest myths. The Babylonian mapmaker did not set out to deceive, but to explain, to create a world that made sense according to the knowledge and values of his time. That fundamental human urge to take the chaos of existence and draw a box around it, to place ourselves at the center of a story we can understand, is the true origin of every map ever made. It is a reminder that we still carry this ancient impulse with us today, viewing our modern, satellite-verified charts not just as tools, but as confirmations of our own place in the order of things. The Babylonian mapmaker sought order in a sacred cosmos, but what if that order was based on maps far more literal than we have ever allowed ourselves to believe? This question brings us full circle, back to the ink and parchment of the Piri Reis map and its most tantalizing clue, the admiral's own handwritten notes in the margins. He did not claim divine inspiration for his southern continent. Instead, he wrote plainly of consulting source maps, some drawn in the time of Alexander the Great, and charts from the Western Isles. These are not vague allusions, they are specific citations pointing to a library of lost knowledge. So what were these vanished maps, and who could have drawn them with such impossible accuracy? The most romantic and persistent theory points to the legendary Library of Alexandria, that great repository of the ancient world's wisdom, said to have held over 500,000 scrolls. Among its treasures, historians believe, were the detailed logs and coastal surveys of generations of sailors, from Greek merchants to Egyptian explorers, and most intriguingly, the master mariners of the Phoenician civilization. The Phoenicians were not myth, they were a real and formidable maritime power centered in the Levant over 2,000 years before Piri Reis was born. Their archaeological footprint is one of trade, not empire, marked by scattered pottery and inscriptions from Spain to Sardinia and across the Mediterranean. Classical historians like Herodotus recorded an astounding claim that Phoenician sailors, commissioned by an Egyptian pharaoh, successfully circumnavigated the continent of Africa, a voyage that would have taken years and required navigating the treacherous southern capes. Mainstream scholarship often dismisses this account as legend, yet it persists in the historical record as a stubborn whisper of what might have been possible. Could a detailed chart from such a voyage have survived the centuries, copied and recopied, its origins forgotten until it landed in the hands of a Turkish admiral in Constantinople? The idea suggests a shadow history of exploration, where ancient civilizations possessed a geographical literacy that flickered in and out of record, preserved in fragments like the Turin mining map but lost for grander scales. It connects disparate dots, a Phoenician coin found in the Azores, suggestive of Atlantic exploration, or the mysterious similarity between certain Pacific Island petroglyphs and ancient Mediterranean scripts. This is not to claim a single, secret global civilization, but rather to propose a more interconnected and curious ancient world than our textbooks often allow, where knowledge of coastlines and currents was a prized commodity passed along trade routes that spanned oceans. Viewing the Piri Reis map through this lens transforms it from an isolated anomaly into a potential palimpsest, a 15th century document overwritten on the faint, fading traces of a much older one. It becomes a ghostly echo, the last surviving copy of a map whose original creators sailed into oblivion, their names erased by time, leaving only the shape of a coastline they once knew as a guide for those who would come millennia later. This speculative journey is less about proving a specific theory and more about opening a door in our imagination, to consider that the history of discovery may be a cycle of remembering and forgetting, and that our oldest maps might not show us the world as it was, but the world as it was once known. These whispers from the past no longer speak only to historians in quiet archives. Today, they enter a digital dialogue with the most advanced tools humanity has ever possessed. Satellite imagery and geographic information system software have transformed ancient cartography from a subject of speculation into one of precise measurement. Researchers can now take a scanned fragment of a 15th century Portolan chart, stretch and warp its digital image using complex algorithms, and overlay it directly onto a satellite map of the modern world. This process, known as georeferencing, allows us to quantify an ancient mapmaker's accuracy down to the kilometer. We can see not just that a coastline is roughly correct, but exactly which capes were charted perfectly and which were distorted, offering clues about which areas were well-traveled and which were drawn from second-hand reports. This technical conversation reveals the meticulous skill behind these documents, turning artistic lines into data points that tell a story of observation versus tradition. But the technology goes far beyond simple overlay. Light detection and ranging, or LiDAR, has opened a window into landscapes hidden for centuries. By firing laser pulses from an aircraft through dense jungle canopy, LiDAR strips away the vegetation to reveal the ghostly footprints of human civilization below. It has unveiled vast Mayan megalopolises in Guatemala and intricate road networks in the Amazon, rewriting our understanding of pre-Columbian America. This tool holds a tantalizing promise for our map mysteries. Could a future LiDAR survey of the Greenlandic or North Atlantic seafloor, for instance, identify the submerged topography of a sandbank or a now-sunken island that once inspired the phantom Frisland on the Zeno map? Could it map the sub-glacial contours of Antarctica with even greater precision, searching for a match to Buache's theoretical Southern Sea? These are no longer fanciful questions but active research possibilities. The investigation has become a collaborative endeavor where data scientists run pattern recognition algorithms on faded ink, geologists analyze sediment cores to date ancient shorelines, and historians contextualize the numbers. This interdisciplinary approach means we are no longer just looking at these maps, we are listening to them with new ears, asking them new questions. The goal is not a simple verdict of real or fake, but a deeper understanding of the layers of knowledge, error, and insight each parchment contains. Every technological leap from the satellite to the laser offers a fresh chance to sit with these enigmatic documents and ask, what were you trying to show us? The conversation between the past and the present is just getting started, and the next discovery might be waiting in the next scan, the next algorithmic correlation, the next pulse of light returning from a forgotten world. But these maps captivate us for reasons far deeper than technical analysis or historical debate. Their true power lies in the profound human questions they awaken within us. They speak directly to our innate love for mystery, the quiet thrill of an unsolved puzzle that hints at a world richer and more complex than our textbooks allow. Each faded coastline and cryptic annotation whispers the same tantalizing possibility, that there are entire chapters of the human story missing from our library, pages torn out by time, conflict, or simple neglect. This is the romantic allure of legends like Atlantis or a forgotten global seafaring culture, not necessarily as literal truths, but as powerful symbols representing all the knowledge that slipped through the cracks of history. These maps challenge the comfortable, linear narrative we often tell ourselves, the story of steady, European-led progress from ignorance to enlightenment. Instead, they present a messier, more intriguing reality, a tapestry of discovery woven from many threads across many cultures, a tapestry with frayed edges and puzzling gaps. They force us to confront a sobering truth that civilization is fragile, and that libraries, whether in Alexandria or Tenochtitlan, can burn. The greatest repository of geographical knowledge the ancient world ever produced could vanish in a single conflict, leaving behind only faint echoes in a later admiral's notes. This realization humbles us. It makes us wonder what monumental insights from our own era might be lost to future generations, what digital archives might become unreadable, what truths we hold as certain that will one day seem quaint or misguided. These artifacts exist in a fascinating borderland, right at the intersection of verifiable science, documented history, and enduring mythology. A single parchment can be a precise navigational tool, a record of political ambition, and a vessel for cultural myth all at once. They do not offer easy answers, but instead hold up a mirror to our own minds, reflecting our deep-seated curiosity and our perpetual desire to find our place in the grand story. This is why the conversation continues, why new technologies are brought to bear on old ink, and why we keep looking. The quest is not just to chart continents, but to chart the contours of human ingenuity itself, a journey that, like the maps themselves, is forever incomplete and endlessly compelling. That dialogue between past and present is not a closed book, but an ongoing invitation. Our journey across centuries and continents, from Babylonian clay to Renaissance parchment, reveals a stunning truth. The history of discovery is far more complex and interconnected than a simple timeline suggests. These 15 ancient maps are not mere curiosities. They are fragments of a puzzle, hinting at voyages forgotten, knowledge exchanged, and continents glimpsed. Each one represents a different path to understanding, whether through the scholarly deduction of Buache, the theoretical guesswork of Finé, or the diligent preservation of lost sources by Piri Reis. These cartographers, separated by vast distances and eras, all captured whispers of lands beyond their known world, leaving behind coded messages for us to decipher. While some mysteries, like the true origin of the Vinland map's ink, may never be fully solved, the pursuit of their meaning is itself a profound endeavor. It enriches our understanding of human ingenuity and curiosity, reminding us that our ancestors were just as driven to make sense of their place in the cosmos as we are today. Let these maps inspire you to look at history with questioning eyes, to appreciate that the past is not a fixed story, but a living conversation filled with gaps and wonders. There remain vast, uncharted territories in our own collective memory, waiting for the next curious mind to connect the dots. If this exploration has ignited your curiosity, we would love to hear your thoughts on which of these maps intrigues you most in the comments below. Share your perspective and subscribe to join us as we continue to unravel the great mysteries of history, one forgotten page at a time.